I got the opportunity to go out to Mission South Dakota this summer, and this church has had a relationship with Mission South Dakota. It started 3 years ago. We went on a multi-generational mission trip, and a lot of you out there remember that trip well. And we had a relationship with Mother Lauren, which I'll talk about later, and that was with Rosebud Episcopalian Missions. And I'm going to talk about group missions first. Can you do the next slide, please? This was one of my jobs at the beginning of the week on Sunday. From 12 to 2, the different groups come in, and I was designated the welcome person. I had to hold the sign and welcome the buses and the vans. And there was a big tour bus from Grand Rapids that came in. Next slide, please. There were 9 different youth groups from 9 different states. And they formed 25 work crews in 15 different sites. And my job was to be a site manager, and I was responsible for 5 sites. So if you do the math, you know there were 2 other site managers. And the thing about being out in the West, 45, 50 miles isn't very far of a drive. 2 of my sites were in a town called Winner, which was 45 miles away. And I'd have to check on all my sites and see if they needed anything. And I spent a lot of time in Winner. Next slide, please. And part of group missions, these youth groups that come in, they have programming also. And the theme for the week was relentless, and relentlessly pursuing Jesus, God. And the programming is in the morning before they go off to work, and then again at evening. Next slide, please. They would sit with their youth groups, and then they do the programming. And then after programming, they would do their youth group devotions on their own with their youth group. Next slide. Here's some of the groups doing their devotions at night. Usually the night programming started at 7:30, get done about 8:45, and then they do their youth group devotions. Next slide. This was the sign-in table. The gentleman there, the gentleman there is Eric. He was in charge of the tool room. And the next slide is me at the tool room checking out some ladders. I'm talking to Ron. He was one of the site managers. He was from Pennsylvania, and he has such a heart for this. He does like 2 of these a summer. He'll take his vacation time. Him and his wife both come out, and she works in the hospitality and helping serve and around the office area. And he's a site manager, and he said he just loves it. And he sent me a nice card, wants to know where I'm going to go next year. Right now I'm thinking about going to Mescalero. They're having a work camp in Mescalero this next summer. Next slide. Here's some of the work we do. We paint. Next slide. And we repair decks. This is Stacy Miles, and she was a resident that was just so excited and just so grateful. She kept saying, "This is so beautiful." And in the next couple slides, you'll be able to see. Here's a friend of mine that I met. His name is Tim, and he's from Oklahoma. And I told him my kids went to Central Michigan University, and he said, "Yeah, 2 years ago they beat Oklahoma State." And the last second thing he said, I don't really like those guys. And then this is amazing. If you look at this is a before picture. And if you look at the next picture, that's how it transformed. The home is from the person you saw in front right there. He fixed the handrails that were in disrepair. the crew painted, and they had this place done in 2 days. It just looks like a new house. Next slide, please. This is one of the winter sites. They kind of, if you go back, there's a sign on there. It says Viking country, and I asked them if they knew Kirk Cousins. I said, yeah, he's from my hometown. They were Viking fans. But this is another transformation where we had to rebuild the entryway. We put a wheelchair ramp in. If you go to the next slide, it just made the house look so much better. Next slide, please. This is another site in winter. This is Vivian Milk, I think her name was, and we rebuilt her. The stairs in the back were all broken down and didn't have any handrails, and she said she went out last winter and her grandson was in her arms and she tripped. She said she had to throw him into a snowbank. So she was so happy to have the new stairs. And this crew, this was a group of, it was a totally female crew, and they just made this house look, it was a white house, but then they painted this Coventry blue. They used a lot of that. It looked just super. And with the new stairs, she was so happy. Next slide. Here's a wheelchair ramp. This was a site in Antelope, which is right by Mission, and they redid the skirting. You can see down below, they used this metal roofing actually and redid the skirting, built on a wheelchair ramp, and just this woman was so happy. She was just full of joy. Next slide. There's where you can see they put the skirting in. These kids just did a phenomenal job. What they do is they have all these youth groups come in, and they mix them all up on different crews, and they become close friends. They work together. You know, at the programming the last couple nights, you know, they're kids that didn't know each other before, and they got their arms around each other and are just moving and having a great time. This is Stacy Miles' finished house. It just looks so much nicer. I didn't have a before shot of that one, but it looks good. She was so pleased and so grateful. Next slide, please. This is the crew that helped out finish that wheelchair ramp. The guy standing there in the orange with the hat on there, he was kind of like the guy that could get this thing done. His name was Mike Walton, and he actually is from Illinois, but he comes up to Holland, and he knew of Holland, and he goes fishing with a friend from Zealand. So it just, the people that I met, the people that I got to know, it was just phenomenal. Next slide. Now this is kind of, we're switching gears. That was the whole group missions. And then in my spare time, I went and I visited Mother Lauren and got to meet her seminarians for the summer. She had some people from seminary helping her out. And they built this, since we were out there last 3 years ago, they built this, they call it the pallet barn. It's filled with firewood for the elders. Next slide. This is the pallet barn. It's built of all pallets. And they put a roof on it, keeps the wood dry. And then they put this gate on it where it's locked up, and it says, please only take 100 pieces per household. Take only your fair share. And this is a gift from God, it says, for the people of God. Free firewood. And when they run out of wood in the winter in South Dakota, it's you know, it gets down bitter cold in the 20 below zero without wind chill. Next slide. This is a new log splitter they got. When we were out there 3 years ago, a guy from another church on the north side, David Becker, and I helped him put together an 8-ton log splitter, but this is she called this, I think, Goliath or something. This is a 25-ton log splitter. Next slide. Here's some pictures of the wood. It holds 70 cords of firewood. Next slide. This is the church that's in Mission that she She has several churches she goes to in the outlying areas, but this is the main church. And they just had redone the sign. And some of you that were on the trip 3 years ago probably recognized the people in the back, Errol and Bert. And next slide. Here's up by, this is kind of up where they call it the Welcome House, where the seminarians stay. And that's Mother Lauren. She kind of does a ton of work with Habitat for Humanity, the firewood projects, different things, and always doing it with a lot of joy. Next slide. There's a guy that's new. I worked with him 3 years ago, and he was going out to Oregon to live with his brother because there's a lot of challenges for youth on the reservation, a lot of drugs, alcohol, things like that, and get in trouble. So he was going to go out and live with his brother up in Oregon. Next slide. And that's the final slide. They worked on the roof. The guy in the middle is a guy that everybody that went on that trip knows. That's Danny, and he was kind of like, he leads the work crews for Mother Lauren. Really good guy. Next slide. Thank you all. I'd like to say thanks for Vision for Missions that they supported me, and also thank the church for all their support. And that's a beautiful sunrise over Mission, South Dakota. I think I went over my 5 minutes. Yeah, thanks.